Imagine standing on the edge of the known world, staring west toward an ocean of endless wilderness where no laws existed, where fortunes could be made overnight, where mountains, deserts, and hostile frontiers separated ordinary men from immortality. This was not fantasy. This was America, a nation born from revolution, forged through courage, and expanded by men and women willing to risk everything for freedom, land, and destiny. Long before skyscrapers dominated the skyline and highways crossed the continent, there was the frontier, a brutal, untamed world where survival itself became a measure of greatness. And from that frontier emerged the most legendary chapter in American history, the Wild West. For generations, the image of the Old West has captured the imagination of millions across the world. Dust-covered cowboys riding beneath endless skies, steam locomotives roaring across barren plains, outlaws vanishing into the desert with stolen gold, sheriffs standing alone against chaos, and pioneers pushing ever westward into lands untouched by modern civilization. But the real Wild West was far greater than the myths Hollywood later created. It was the story of a young nation expanding across an entire continent with unstoppable determination. It was the story of ambition so powerful that ordinary people abandoned everything they knew and marched into the unknown, searching for opportunity, freedom, and glory. And above all, it was the story of the American spirit itself, fearless, relentless, and impossible to contain. When the United States declared independence from Britain in 1776, the nation was still fragile and uncertain. 13 colonies lined the eastern coast of North America, surrounded by powerful empires and vast, unexplored territories stretching far beyond the horizon. But even in those early years, Americans believed their future did not end at the Appalachian Mountains. To them, the West represented something larger than land. It represented possibility. In crowded eastern cities, opportunities were controlled by wealthy elites and old systems inherited from Europe. But beyond the frontier, a man could reinvent himself. A farmer could own land. A laborer could become wealthy. A nobody could become a legend. That dream spread rapidly among immigrants arriving from Europe, many of whom saw America not merely as a country, but as the final chance to change their destiny forever. Everything changed in 1803 with the Louisiana Purchase. Overnight, the United States doubled in size. Millions of acres of wilderness suddenly became part of the young republic, opening the door to expansion on a scale the world had never seen before. The Mississippi River became the artery of American commerce, while explorers like Lewis and Clark ventured into territories almost completely unknown to the eastern population. Their expedition revealed landscapes so enormous and untamed that they seemed almost mythical. Endless grasslands filled with buffalo herds numbering in the millions, towering mountains piercing the clouds, violent rivers capable of swallowing entire expeditions, and Native American nations whose ancestors had ruled these lands for centuries. To many Americans, it felt as though God himself had prepared the continent for their arrival. As the decades passed, the idea of manifest destiny took hold across the country. The belief that Americans were destined to expand from coast to coast, carrying democracy, industry, Christianity, and civilization across the continent. This belief fueled one of the greatest migrations in human history. Thousands of families sold everything they owned, packed their lives into covered wagons, and began journeys westward that would test the limits of human endurance. The Oregon Trail, the Santa Fe Trail, and the California Trail became roads into uncertainty, where death waited around every corner. These pioneers crossed deserts under unbearable heat, climbed mountain passes buried in snow, and endured diseases that could kill within hours. Cholera tore through wagon trains without warning, rivers drowned entire families, food supplies vanished, children were buried beside the trail. Yet they kept moving west. Every mile represented hope, every sunrise represented survival, and every wagon that disappeared into the frontier helped build the legend of the American pioneer. Then came the discovery that changed everything forever: gold. In 1848, gold was found in California, triggering an explosion of migration unlike anything America had ever witnessed. Men abandoned farms, factories, businesses, and even families to chase unimaginable wealth. Ships flooded San Francisco Bay. Mining camps appeared overnight. Tiny settlements transformed into booming frontier towns filled with saloons, gambling halls, brothels, merchants, drifters, and gunmen. The West became a place where fortunes could be won in a single day or lost with a single bullet. Towns like Deadwood and Tombstone became symbols of frontier life, places where civilization and chaos existed side by side. There were few laws, little government oversight, and almost no safety. Violence became part of everyday existence. Arguments inside saloons ended in gunfights. Outlaws robbed trains carrying gold and cash across the frontier. Vigilantes enforced their own brutal version of justice. In many towns, survival depended entirely on how fast a man could draw his revolver. Yet beyond the violence and legends, the West was also transforming America into an economic superpower. Railroads stretched across the continent, linking East and West together for the first time in history. Massive cattle ranches emerged across the plains, creating the era of the cowboy. Real cowboys were not glamorous heroes from Hollywood films. They were hardened workers who spent months driving enormous cattle herds across dangerous territory through storms, heat, exhaustion, and constant threat of attack. Their lifestyle demanded toughness few people today could imagine. But over time, these men became one of the most iconic symbols of American culture. The cowboy embodied independence, courage, resilience, and freedom, values that Americans deeply admired and still celebrate today. Meanwhile, another side of the frontier story unfolded with devastating consequences. Native American tribes resisted the unstoppable expansion of settlers moving into their ancestral lands. Warriors like Sitting Bull, Crazy Horse, Red Cloud, and Geronimo became legendary for their courage in battle against overwhelming odds. Some victories shocked the nation, especially the Battle of Little Bighorn in 1876, where General George Custer and hundreds of U.S. soldiers were annihilated by native warriors. But despite fierce resistance, the advance of the United States could not be stopped. Railroads, settlements, industry, and military power steadily pushed native tribes onto reservations, while buffalo herds, essential to survival on the plains, were hunted nearly to extinction. The conquest of the West came at an enormous human cost, and even today its legacy remains deeply emotional and controversial within American history. As the 19th century came to an end, the frontier slowly disappeared. Railroads replaced wagon trails. Telegraph lines connected distant towns instantly. Law enforcement became stronger. Cities grew where wilderness once existed. The great cattle drives faded away. Mining towns became ghost towns scattered across deserts and mountains. By the early 1900s, many Americans believed the Wild West was over forever. But something unexpected happened. Instead of dying, the West became immortal. Showmen like Buffalo Bill Cody transformed frontier history into massive public spectacles watched by millions. Then came motion pictures, turning cowboys, sheriffs, outlaws, and pioneers into larger-than-life heroes. Hollywood carried the myth of the Wild West across the globe, shaping how generations viewed America itself. The lone gunslinger, the fearless sheriff, the outlaw rebel, the brave pioneer heading into the unknown. These images became inseparable from the American identity. Even now, more than a century later, the spirit of the Wild West still lives on. It exists in American culture, music, fashion, movies, sports, and storytelling. It survives in the belief that ordinary people can achieve extraordinary things through determination and courage. Because the frontier was more than geography. It was an idea, the belief that no obstacle was too great, no horizon too distant, and no dream impossible for those willing to fight for it. The Wild West was dangerous, violent, and often tragic. But it was also the forge that shaped modern America, a place where legends were born, where empires rose, and where the American spirit proved itself against one of the harshest frontiers in human history. And that is why, even today, the legend of the Wild West still rides across the imagination of the world.